So Pirkei Avos, chapter 4, and we will begin with what I have as Mishnah Chaf Daled, Mishnah 24, and the Mishnah says as follows. Elisha ben Avuya Omer, Elisha, the son of Avuya, says, Halomed Yeled Lemahu Domeh. One who teaches or learns as a child, I'd say learns, I guess, is a simple translation here. One who learns when a child, to what is he compared? Lidio kisuva al niar chadash, to ink written upon a new writing sheet. There's nothing to write over. It's a clean slate. It's a clean sheet of paper. And when a person learns when they're young, it is like writing on a clean paper. Ve'alomed zaken lemahudam, and one who learns when they are elderly. What is that compared to? Lidiok suva al niar machuk. That's like ink that's written on an erased paper. So what is the difference between writing on a clean paper and an erased paper? So a clean paper, like we said, it's clean. There's nothing to write over. An erased paper is actually also clean. It's just not as clean. It's not a dirty paper, right? It's not that you're writing over existing writing. It is that you've erased what's there. But even when you erase something, it leaves a mark. So in this message, there are, multiple lessons. But to start, the Midrash Shmuel, first of all, says that the Mishnah is expressing that if one has the opportunity to learn when they're young, then all the better. And if one learns when they're young, then they'll have a greater chance of learning, of understanding when they get older. Part of the imagery of the ink on the paper, the clean paper, the ink will be much clearer, much more defined, and on the erased paper, which is all smudgy and stuff, so the ink will show. It just won't be as clear. And so if one has the chance to begin learning when they're young, then they have a better shot at having clear understanding when they're older. But if one only begins learning when they're older, so then it just they'll have a more difficult time getting clarity and getting understanding of the Torah. Now, that being said, he is not suggesting that one who only starts learning when they're older shouldn't learn. And in fact, that's what we see. It doesn't say that when one learns when they're older, it's like ink written on over other writing, in which case you wouldn't be able to read it at all. It would be very difficult to read something that's written over something else that's written, but it would just look like scribbles. But it's on an erased paper. It means it won't necessarily be as clear. It won't jump off the page as much, but a person can still it can still make a mark, it can still make a roshim, still making imprint on the paper that's readable, that's understandable. But one who has the opportunity to learn when they're young should take advantage. It will give them a head start, give them a better chance as they get older to have a better and more clear understanding. Additionally, the Midrash Shmuel cites from the Abarbanel that part of besides for just, obviously, if a person gets a head start, they just have a greater chance of acquiring more knowledge, deeper understanding. But beyond that, there's the issue, the challenge of having to overwrite things that one learned when they were younger. If one learned the wrong things when they were younger, if one learned ideas that are in opposition to Torah lifestyle, to Torah outlook, so then you need to overwrite. And which again is possible, and that's what we're saying. It's possible to erase the ideas so to speak, that one was brought up with if they were the wrong ideas. But even when you erase something, there's still a roshem. There's still, you see the erasure marks on the page, so to speak. So the Abarbanel says that that's what this Mishnah is trying to bring out, that if one begins a life of Torah learning when they're young, and their brain and their mind isn't filled with other influences and other ideas, so then the imprint of the Torah will be more clear and more strong, as opposed to someone who spent the beginning of their life taking in other ideas. So then you need to overwrite that, but they will remain with the person somewhat. They leave a mark. At the same time, they could be erased. That's what it's describing. It's talking about a page that's erased, but the point is that something that's erased is not like a clean paper. It's not quite as clean as having never had it. So the lesson, I think the takeaway is to realize, right? Of course, if we're already at an age that we can't call ourselves young anymore and of a clean slate. But of course, we're all pursuing learning still. But even now, we can fill our minds with all kinds of different ideas. And we don't want to have competing ideals, competing messages. There are a lot of different influencers out there in the world of different types. And we might think that their outlook, it makes sense, it's similar, but if it's not rooted in Torah, then I think it's competing, and it's something that we then have a Torah idea that comes in, that enters, that we learn, and if it's competing with an ideal that someone else taught us, that we read or heard from someone else, so then we have to try to erase, and that's already it leaves its mark. So the message, according to the Abarbanel, really is to be careful about what we read, what we learn, who we learn from, and make sure that we're getting our messages from a good place, because if they're not, then they're sometimes hard to completely erase. They'll leave a mark with us. Okay, which I think is a good lead-in to the next Mishnah. So just to summarize this Mishnah, pretty straightforward idea. The Mishnah said when one learns when they're young, so then it's like writing on a clean paper. If one learns when they're older, then it's like writing on an erased paper. So two ways that could be interpreted. Number one, in terms of how clear our understanding is. If we start young, the younger that we start, the better a grasp we'll have on Torah ideas. If we don't have the opportunity to start young, it's still worthwhile. Don't give up. Keep going. It will still leave a mark. It might not be as clear. It might be on an erased page instead of a clean page, but it still leaves a mark. That's number one. And the second is not necessarily only about clarity, but about competing ideals and competing messages. And if a person learns when they're young, before they've imbibed the messages of the outside world, of other influences, so then it will make a mark. Their minds and their hearts will be more open and will be able to receive what they've learned more easily, as opposed to if a person first takes in other ideals and other perspectives that perhaps are in contrast to the Torah's perspective. So then it's a little bit harder to overcome that, overwrite that, to erase that. And so we just have to be careful about what kind of messages we allow into our homes, into our lives, into our phones, into our screens, etc. Okay, the next Mishnah, which is Mishnah Chafei 25, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda ish kfar Bavli Omer. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda who was from a village called Kfar Babli, he says, I guess there were a lot of Babylonians there. Halomed min hakatanim lemahu dome. One who learns from the young, to what is he compared? Le'ochel anavim keos v'shosei yain migito. It's like someone who eats grapes that are, here they translate as unripe, maybe you could say bitter, unripe grapes, and drinks wine from the vat. Drinking wine from the vat means it's grape juice, basically. It's not yet, it's the grapes have just been squeezed. They haven't fermented yet into wine. It might be sweet. It's not that good. And that's one who learns from what it says, katanim, in contrast to what we're going to say, zakanim, the elder. So katanim would mean young. V'alomen min hazakanim, and one who learns from the elderly, from older people, lamahu dome. What is he compared to? L'ochel anavim b'shelos, b'shose yayin yashan. It's like eating ripe grapes and drinking old wine. Much, much better. So the previous Mishnah was about when to start learning. This Mishnah is who to learn from. So the first Mishnah was saying that we should start learning as early as we can, be careful about the influences that we take on. This Mishnah is advising us in who to learn from. And we should really just see it in contrast to the next Mishnah, or in contrast, or in lieu of, with keeping in mind the next Mishnah says, Rabbi Omer, which is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, says, Al tistakel bakankan el b'masha yeshbo. Don't just look at the jug, the container, rather look at what's inside. Yesh kankan chadash male yashan. You can have a new jug, which is full of old wine. The yashan, and an old one, shafilu chadash einbo, and an old one that doesn't even have new wine in it. Now that could be referring to a teacher. That don't just look at the outside, the age of the teacher, but what's inside, their knowledge, their traits, their midos. Right? You could have a new jug that's full of old in this case would be, good, ancient wisdom, good wisdom, experience, and then you can have a new teacher, an old teacher who doesn't even have new stuff, doesn't have anything, is empty basically. So that's something, we're not up to that Mishnah yet, but that Mishnah is kind of saying, don't only learn from older people, a young person could be good too. That's what it seems to be saying, at least. This Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi, says one who learns from the young, it's like eating bitter grapes, basically unripe grapes, and drinking wine before it's fermented, before it's turned into wine. But if you learn from the elders, so then it's like eating ripe grapes and drinking old wine, which is the good stuff. So the first thing Midrash Shmuel says in comparison of these two Mishnayos is that this Mishnah is in the plural and the next Mishnah is in the singular. And that's because this Mishnah is a generalization and the next Mishnah is saying there are exceptions. In other words, he says these Mishnayos are not arguing. Others suggest they are arguing. Midrash Shmuel doesn't think they're arguing. This Mishnah is saying, in general, it's better if you learn from young people, it's going to be, we'll elaborate still, but bigger grapes and unready wine, and while from old people, that's where it's at. Ripe grapes and good wine, old wine. That's in general. That's why it's in plural. There are exceptions. Don't only look and automatically grab onto someone because they look old and they look like they have a lot of experience and understanding, but also you have to pay attention to what's actually inside. Now, okay, so what is this Mishnah really saying? What is the analogy here to the grapes and the wine? It seems there's two different things also. Was it not enough to just say one thing? It's like old grapes versus ripe grapes, or bad wine versus good wine. What's grapes and wine? Why do we need two things for this analogy? So the Midrash Shmuel cites a number of suggestions. The first one is that grapes represent that which is revealed. It's what's on the outside, what we call nigle, the revealed part of Torah, while the wine represents the nistar, the hidden, the sod, the hidden parts of Torah, what we call Kabbalah, and so it says that if one learns from somebody who is too young, they inexperienced. So first of all, they're missing out on both. They're what he calls pugum in both. They're lacking. It's dented. It's in both areas. There's going to be a lacking. One is in the area of nigla and the grapes, the open grapes, and one is in the area of nistar in the Kabbalah, in the deeper secrets of Torah. They'll also be missing out, and um, it's the way it's expressed as like kehos, as which again, this translation says it means unripe. It could mean like blunt. It's like the way he says it, the message is that it leaves a person with lots of questions, with doubts, with a lack of understanding, and so in a general sense, a young teacher doesn't know as much and will both in the area of Nigla and Nistar, in the open parts of Torah, the revealed parts of Torah, and in the hidden parts of Torah, they'll be lacking as opposed to someone who has greater experience. Okay. Alternatively, the grapes could represent knowledge, and the wine is what you get from that knowledge, what you produce, what you pull out from it. And in Hebrew we might call it chachma and tivuna. Chachma is wisdom, is knowledge. Tivuna is like the understanding, the depths of it. So by going deeper, we don't mean like Kabbalah, like the depths of Torah. We mean iyun, further, deeper understanding. And that's the analogy here to the grapes and the wine. And he suggests sometimes, and what does it do with younger or old? Sometimes people who are young, they're quick, they're decisive, they're impulsive, and they might be very sharp, but maybe a little too sharp at times. And arriving, I don't mean sharp in the way that they speak to people, but in the way that they process. And like, they think they know it. And they think they came up with the greatest interpretation. And they haven't really thought it through because could be a bit of immaturity, a bit of impulsiveness. And that's the expression of grapes that are kehos, that are bitter. Bitter is like sharp. So they're like sharp grapes. They hit you, they'll hit you quickly and hard and perhaps incorrectly. And so the young are more likely basically to err, to make mistakes. And as a result, also, they have their wisdom, they have what they know, and also as they delve further, as they draw out the wine, they draw out the iyun, the deeper meaning, they, again, with that impulsiveness, that quick decision making, they may not arrive at the right conclusions. Somebody who's older, first of all, they've had more time to process, right? It's certainly true that I think every older person can look back, and older can mean whatever age you are. I don't mean like a specific age. I just mean once you're old enough to be able to look back, let's say that. I think people will look back and look at things that they thought when they were younger and realize, well, actually, that's because I was too decisive, too impulsive, too immature, too quick to judge, too quick to interpret. And now that I'm a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, I see the world with a broader lens. I have a better understanding of how people work, how the world works. and within Torah, I have a better understanding of how the Torah works, and that comes from experience, and that's the difference between someone young, someone inexperienced. They'll draw conclusions. They'll say this is what it means, not realizing that if they had a little bit more life experience, then they would know that that can't be what it means. Or just they're too quick to decide it, not knowing that if they would think it through a little bit more, if they would have more time to think something through, to process it, maybe even to see more Torah, to learn more, they'll see it can't be true. A young person might suggest an interpretation, and then a few years later, they'll have learned a little bit more, and they'll see that they'll come across something that means that their first interpretation cannot be true. They just don't have the experience, the knowledge to be able to come to the right conclusions. So in that sense, somebody who is older, more experienced, is preferable to learn from. And um, and this idea about experience and knowledge, it can also be fit into the analogy of the ripe versus the unripe, right? The fermented versus the not yet fermented. Um, and those are just time. That's just time. Time. What's the difference between an unripe grape and a ripe grape? Time. And it's sat on the vine a little bit longer. And if it sits on the vine a little bit longer, it's going to taste a little better. And the same with wine. Wine sits in the vat. If it's only been there a few days, it's not yet wine, and it's not as good. A little time, a little fermenting, and then you have good old wine. And and this is true of teachers, that again, somebody who has had a little bit more time, a little bit more experience, will often be able to offer more perspective and better understanding. And it's interesting to consider this Mishnah, especially in our time. I don't know if our time is different than any other time, but we have this idea, we have an idea of ageism, and sometimes somebody's young and dynamic, and they and therefore younger people certainly look to them more, connect to them more easily. But the Mishnah is reminding us there's still a major difference. Experience is not to be discounted, and especially in particular when looking for a teacher. And really, I think you can really see it when you encounter someone who's really great in Torah, a Torah scholar, who's, again, sometimes people reaching age where they don't their mind starts to slip a little bit, then it could be harder to learn from them. But when you encounter great Torah scholars who are older, and they're still so sharp, and just such a breadth of knowledge, you really see this. That doesn't have to be like that. You see in other places too. But I think this Mishnah is definitely something that's important to contemplate, where sometimes we rush to learn from the exciting, the dynamic, the showy. Now with like media and videos, you can do all sorts of fancy things. You could put out videos that have music and backgrounds and like all sorts of things going on in the background. Like, yeah, but that doesn't express the person's level of knowledge and experience. And we should consider, are the messages that a person is presenting, do they come from a place of knowledge, a place of understanding? And often somebody with more life experience will be able to offer a more correct a message and a lesson and teaching that is not impulsive and does not contain the same errors that someone else might. Okay, so to summarize, the Mishnah said that if one learns from the young, it's like eating grapes that are bitter and drinking wine from the vat. unfermented, is not ready yet, as opposed to learning from people who are older. It's like eating ripe grapes and drinking old wine. And we said, first of all, as we'll discuss shortly in the next Mishnah, that this isn't always the case. It's a general rule, but there's always exceptions. There's always exceptions. We'll discuss the exceptions shortly. But as a general rule, in a general sense, we should realize that young people often are impulsive, they're quick to come to decisions, they can make mistakes as a result, they have less experience, as opposed to somebody who's a little bit older, has more life experience. And in terms of the grapes and the wine, the grapes could be the nigla, the revealed part of Torah. The wine could be the nistar, the hidden part of Torah, Kabbalah. Alternatively, the grapes could be just general knowledge, and the wine could be what you draw out from that knowledge, what you pull out, the conclusions you come to, the depths that you find in it yourself, or the teacher finds, the teacher brings out. And in all of these areas, somebody with more years behind them, more knowledge as a result of their years, has seen more of the world, has seen more people, has more experience, is likely to have to be somebody that is preferable to learn from. Okay. Next Mishnah. Mishnah Chafav. Rabbi Omer. Rabbi says, Al tistakel b'kankan el b'ma sheyesh bo. Don't look at the jug, rather at what's inside. So I think this on its own, that line is quite a famous line, and taken to mean many things. Although in the context, okay, actually, I mean, I think even in the context of the previous Mishnah, it's clear that from the commentaries they understand this in terms of teachers. But really, it goes beyond that. Right? It's like, don't judge a book by its cover. You don't know what's inside. Could be true in so many areas of life. People in general. It's an important lesson for people in general. Don't judge a person by the way that they look. You see a person, rather what they are like inside. In the specific example the Mishnah gives, it says that you can have a new, showy, nice jug that's full of old wine, which again, is a new jug good? A new jug. So in the context of wine, if it looks new, it's actually bad, because new is not good when it comes to wine. Old wine is good, and you can have an old looking barrel that doesn't even have new wine in it. It's empty, it doesn't have anything in it. So as I said, the commentaries understand this to be talking about a teacher, and it's reminding us that there are always exceptions. Although in general we said it's better to learn from somebody who's older rather than somebody who is younger. But there's always exceptions. And I think that sometimes a person either looks like looks the part, and so people assume that it's somebody worth listening to, or they have a following, right? So you can have someone he's older, he's not older, whatever. He has a beard. He has the title rabbi. His lectures seem popular by other people, and so we're drawn after that sometimes. But even if he's yashang, even if he looks good on the outside, he looks like somebody who's worth learning from. But sometimes there's nothing inside. Afilu chadash ein bo. There's not even new wine in there. Forget about there's saying it's not like there's grape juice in there. There's nothing in there. And this is telling us that we have to use our instincts and use our senses and decide for ourselves if somebody is someone who makes sense to be learning from. There is someone out there, I'm not going to give any references, who is apparently, I doubt anybody here has ever heard or encountered this person in any sense, and it's nothing to do with our community, but who I once listened to a lecture of theirs online, And I hadn't realized this was actually someone who was popular. I just happened to stumble on this lecture. I listened to it. And I was like, why are they even posting this on this website? This is like just somebody boasting about themselves the whole time. And I was like, how can anybody listen to this? And I was really turned off by it. And then, like 2 years later, I realized that this person was someone who actually a lot of people listen to and follow. And I'm still aghast by that. I listened to that person one or two more times, and each time I was like, how can anybody listen to this? Um, but people do. I don't know. People follow this person, and I'm shocked by it. So it's a very rabbinic person, but okay. So I say to that person is empty completely. They really, I have a lot of issues with that, the way that person talks and talks about people, the things they say. And and I think we have to use our instincts and our senses and not just look at the outside. Don't just look at if other people follow them or it looks like a rabbi, right? Or they're posting on a certain site that seems to usually use at least okay judgment in who they host on that site. But use your instincts, use your senses to determine if somebody is someone who we should be learning from. Um, so, so to that point, as the previous Mishnah said, in general, someone older might have more to give, more experience. But this Mishnah says there's exceptions, and you have to explore and you have to use your senses. Look at what's inside. Decide for yourself if what's inside is good or not something to relate to. So that's the simple, straightforward reading of the Mishnah. Straightforward meaning connecting it to the previous Mishnah. Now, the Midrash Shmuel does bring some other explanations of this Mishnah, which don't tie in the same way. So this is a little creative. You'll have to try to picture it for a second. So the Torah describes that God has 13 attributes of mercy. He's Rachum B'chanun, he's merciful and gracious, slow to anger, etc. At the end of that, it says Vinakeh, and he cleanses. But then it says Lo Yinakeh, he doesn't cleanse. And the Gemara discusses this contradiction. But it sounds like that it's saying there, Lo Yinakeh, he doesn't cleanse us of our sins. And therefore a person might be who has done wrong in the past, might give up, might become despondent, be miyayesh, they'll give up, and they'll say, if Hashem doesn't cleanse, then what chance do I have? So besides for that, okay, so the Gemara says that what that means is he doesn't cleanse those who don't do tshuva. If a person doesn't repent, then they don't get cleansed. The Midrash Shmuel says that when it says Al tistakel bakankan ela b'ma sheyesh bo, what it's telling you is like this. So the word vinakeh is a vav, a nun, a kuf, and a hey. So, and then it says lo yinakeh. We'll get to that in a moment. So vinakeh. So if you take out the kan, right? Don't look at the kan. Don't look at the kan. You take out the kan of vinakeh, which is the middle two letters, not nun and kuf, which are kuf and nun, kan. Then you have vav and hey. So don't look at the kan. Okay? Then lo yinakeh, the word yinakeh, same thing. Take out the kan. Take out the kan of yinakeh, the kuf and the nun in the middle. Yinakeh is yud, nun, kuf, hey. So if you take out the kuf and the nun, you're left with yud and hey. So in the first word, vinakeh, you're left with vav and hey. And the second word, if you take out the kan, you're left with yud and hey. So yud and hey and vav and hey, all those letters are God's name. Not just any name, God's name of mercy. So the Mishnah is alluding to that don't look at the kan. Take out the kuf nun of nakeh lo yinakeh, and vinakeh lo yinakeh, and you're left with God's name of mercy. So you come to that verse, he says, and you think that there's no chance because it says lo yinakeh, he doesn't cleanse one of their sins. So no, don't look at the kan ella b'ma sheyeshba, rather what's inside here. In this case, it's not actually what's inside. There is an interpretation that uses the word bima. I'm not going to go there, but rather look at the other letters. That what's left of those words is Yud, Hey, and Vav, Hey, which is God's name, and God's name of mercy. That's where you should look. There's always opportunity for tshuva. So that's a creative and different way to read this Mishnah. Additionally, he suggests that the Mishnah is teaching us, again, something unrelated to the previous Mishnah. It's teaching us how we are to look at ourselves. And it's telling us, don't look at the jug, rather at what's inside, which means don't look at only the physical body, but rather look at what's inside, look to our neshama, look to our soul. If we're focused on our bodies, on the physical, and we're just trying to please the physical side of ourselves, so then we're missing the mark. The body is there to service the neshama, it's there to service the soul. Don't look at the jug, but rather look at what's inside. And he says, and the mashal, the analogy of a jug that has wine inside, one second. Yeah, I mean, basically, you can have a jug that has wine inside. Right. Okay. The mashal, the analogy kind of just takes it a step further, just down that you walk into a store and you see a jug and you want to buy it, right? Because it has a nice it looks like it's an old wine. Well, you want to make sure you know what's inside. And the same thing, you see a new looking jug, you might not want to buy it because you think it has only new wine in it, not old wine. But really, just like when you buy something in the store, you don't look at the box, you don't look at the jug, you look at what's inside. So too, for a person, what's really of the essence is what's inside, which is our neshama. That's what we should be focusing on, our soul, our spirit, the spiritual side of ourselves, rather than the physical side of ourselves. Okay. One more explanation. The Mishnah here is talking about how to honor people. And it's telling us that whether somebody is young, whether somebody is old, we should treat them with honor. When you come across a person, don't look at the jug. Don't look at them on the outside. Don't look at what they look like. Rather, and this is, I guess, where I started. I mentioned this explanation at the beginning. So that even if somebody looks like somebody lowly, but we don't know what you can't tell what a person is like from what they look from the outside. There could be somebody who looks like you wouldn't respect them, but inside is an incredible person. You can't tell from the outside, from the way a person looks, what's inside. And when you have this type of, it's interesting, this interpretation, that when you think about these types of interpretations, like, because we are hopefully trained to say, like, why would we judge somebody by how they look? It's almost like obvious that, but I think the Mishnah is a reminder that we still have a natural tendency to judge by how someone looks. we see someone, they look a certain way, and we start to judge them one way or another. And in general, as you get to know people, usually you get to see that inside is is something beautiful for them, usually. There are exceptions, but usually that's the case. And so like we said, don't judge a jug, don't judge a book by its cover, don't judge someone by the way they look on the outside, because somebody who looks a certain way on the outside could be very different on the inside, for better or for worse. So to summarize this last Mishnah, so some understand it that it's a continuation of the previous Mishnah. The previous Mishnah was telling you to ideally pursue a teacher who has more experience than someone who's young and flashy, someone who has more experience. And this Mishnah is telling you that, but there are exceptions. Don't just look on the outside, look to the inside. And as I said, a person has to use their instincts, get a sense of who you're learning from. If it's somebody who you feel is somebody worth learning from, then good. If not, just because they have the right title or the right position or the right following, but if it doesn't seem right, then there's a good chance that it's not the right person to be learning with. And so that's viewing this Mishnah as connected to the previous Mishnah. And then we offered three other interpretations. One is, again, I think this straightforward one, which is in judging people, don't judge a person by the way they look. We don't know what's inside. Get to know a person, then you'll appreciate them. Secondly, it's telling us about ourselves, that don't only look at our outside, our physical self, but rather look to the inside. We look at what our neshama needs. Our body is there to service our neshama. And finally, we had the creative interpretation, which I think came from Reb Chaim Vital, actually, that the words nakeh lo yinakeh, if we take out the kan from those words, that Hashem doesn't cleanse one of their sins, which could leave a person despondent. It's saying, no, Hashem does cleanse if you do tshuva, and if you take out the word kan, then you're left with God's name, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the name of mercy. Okay, we'll stop there.